Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming out and taking the time to engage in today's conversation. I'm Simone Marian, and with me today is Takai Tyler, and together we're the co-CEOs of Girls Leadership. Girls Leadership is a national educational nonprofit with a mission to teach girls to exercise the power of their voice. We are based in Oakland, California, and we run our programs nationally. We run programs for girls, workshops for families, and we have professional development and curriculum for teachers and nonprofit staff. Our work centers gender and racial equity to address girls' internal and external barriers to leadership development. This roundtable is the fifth and final in a series to understand the implications of our Ready to Lead research report that came out a year ago this month. Our first roundtable last September was led by girls. I can't think of a better way to honor the voices and experiences of those girls than to culminate this conversation series in a discussion of policy. Policy, whether it be local, state, or federal, is the vehicle by which we can create systems and schools that center the wellness, voice, and power of all our girls. The Black and Latinx girls at the center of the study deserve this. A huge thank you to the sponsor of today's event, the Vodafone Americas Foundation. Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge the land. While Girls Leadership is based in Oakland, California, we are gathered today from all over the country. And Oakland is the land of the Ohlone people. We remember their connection to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to live, work, learn, play, and pray on their traditional homeland. Please take a moment of silence to respect the elders and to all the Ohlone people, past and present. We invite you to honor the land where you are. Thank you. We invite you to share today's conversation on social. Our handle is @GirlsLeadership, and this research study is the thread #ReadyToLead. I am honored to welcome our moderator for today, a longtime advocate of this research, executive advisor in Oakland Mayor's Office and co-founder of AssistHub, Patrice Berry. For the last 15 years, Patrice has been on a mission to disrupt the opportunity gaps that deny marginalized communities the transformative power of education and economic empowerment. Today, as co-founder of AssistHub, Patrice is building a tech-based organization in Oakland, California that eases the process of obtaining public benefits in California. Patrice also serves as an executive advisor in Oakland's office of Mayor Libby Schaaf, where she heads a post-secondary and workforce success strategy that emphasizes the importance of equity-driven innovation and multi-sector collaboration. Prior to Oakland, Patrice was the director of College Track East Palo Alto and the director of a student success center in Philadelphia, where she co-founded Leaders of Change, a social entrepreneurship program that helps prepare Pell-eligible first-generation students for success in college, career, and life. Patrice earned her BA in political science from Swarthmore College and holds an MED from the University of Pennsylvania. She currently serves as an advisory board member of Hack the Hood and is on the board of directors for both Mount Tamalpais College and Money Think. Welcome, Patrice.
Thank you so much, Simone, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here. The first time I read this report, I immediately felt seen, and my spirit insisted that I be a part of this work. So I really appreciate you all having me here today. I am going to spend the next few moments introducing our panel. And our first panelist is Dr. Shakira Washington. Next slide. Dr. Washington is the Vice President of Advocacy and Research at National Crittenton. Throughout her career, Dr. Washington has combined community organizing, advocacy, and behavioral research to address the social, economic, and political inequalities faced by marginalized communities with a specific focus on communities of color. Her work has included training and engaging youth and community members in participatory action research, facilitating discussions between communities most impacted by harmful policies, practices, and decision makers, and working in collaboration with others to design and implement studies focused on issues like cancer and HIV/AIDS prevention and the role of adversity during childhood on individual and community outcomes. Her most recent work has focused on social program and policy change for girls, young women, and gender expansive youth who have been exposed to various forms of adversity and violence and the challenges they face as a result of these experiences. Her work is focused on engaging youth as leaders of social change that seeks to shift existing narratives that are antithetical to health, healing, and overall well-being. Dr. Washington received her bachelor's degree in urban studies from San Francisco State University, Go Bay Area, her master's degree in public administration from New York University's Robert F. Wagner School of Public Service, and her doctorate in behavioral and community health from the University of Maryland, Go Maryland, College Park School of Public Health. Welcome, Dr. Washington, and thank you so much for being here. Our next panelist is Dr. Stephanie Wood-Garnett. Dr. Stephanie Wood-Garnett is the president of the Institute for Student Achievement. Before joining the Institute for Student Achievement, she served as the vice president of policy to practice for the Alliance for Excellent Education. Over the course of nearly 30 years in education, she has also served in a variety of roles at the local, state, and national levels, including as the Assistant Commissioner of Higher Education for New York State, where she played a pivotal role in leading Race to the Top initiatives focused on the teacher and leader professional learning and educator licensure. As leader of federal grants and programs, Dr. Wood-Garnett also successfully directed 2 national technical assistance centers funded by the U.S. Department of Education, including the Center for Comprehensive School Reform and Improvement at Learning Point Associates and the IDEA Local Implementation by Local Administrators project at the Council for Exceptional Children. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from Dartmouth College, a Master of Science in Higher Education Administration from the George Washington University, and a Doctorate of Education Policy and Administration from the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater. She currently serves on several national boards, including the Global Science of Learning Education Network and the Learning Policy Institute's Science of Learning and Development Design Principles Advisory Board. Her most important accomplishment, however, is raising 4 girls along with her husband. It's so good to share space with you, Dr. Wood-Garnett. Thank you for being here. And finally, Mia Bonta is with us today. Mia currently serves as the CEO of Oakland Promise, a cradle to college and career preparation initiative serving Oakland public schools. She has seen firsthand how the systems in our state, from education and the criminal justice system to healthcare and housing, often fail to provide for those they're intended to serve. Mia has spent her career advocating for students and for working families. After moving to Alameda, California, more than 20 years ago, Mia worked for and led several nonprofit organizations focused on improving educational outcomes for low-income students. Growing up, Mia moved 13 times in 16 years, and with every move, she carried what was most precious to her, a crate of books. Education was the one constant in her life, and Mia was fortunate to attend schools that would foster her love of learning and offer her a caring community of teachers and administrators committed to her success. For Mia, education was life-changing, and what first inspired Mia to become a public servant. In 2018, Mia was elected to the Alameda Unified School District School Board, and she currently serves as board president. In addition to her professional work, Mia has served as a PTA member, a school site council member, a member of Alameda Free Library Foundation, and an active community member. Mia also serves as a delegate for the district California Democratic Party, worked on several campaigns dedicated to electing progressive labor candidates, and served on the AD 18 advisory committees for women, education, and early childhood. Mia lives in Alameda County with her husband, Rob, and 3 children, the youngest of whom attend Alameda Public Schools. Mia, thank you for joining us. Wow, this is clearly a powerful panel. And to help us all get the most out of what will be each conversation, and certainly not to get in the way, before we jump in, I am going to help us level set by walking you through a brief snapshot of the Ready to Lead research and findings. So this first slide outlines the study's methodology. The study explored the internal and external factors that shape leadership among girls of color, and it was implemented in 2 phases. In phase 1, these 6 focus groups were conducted with groups of middle school and high school girls in Los Angeles, New York, and Cincinnati, Ohio. In phase 2, surveys were implemented among over 2,000 girls ages 12 to 18 and over 600 middle school and high school teachers. Next slide, please. The next few slides call out some of the major findings. First, here you can see one of the major insights from this study, which is that overall, Black and Latinx girls see themselves as leaders and have leadership aspirations. Black and Latinx girls are the most likely to self-identify as leaders compared to other girls, regardless of income. And not pictured here, but one thing I found to be really inspiring is that Black and Latinx girls express that they aspire to be the type of leader who exercises leadership through moral authority, team building, the support of others, and social change values. For a sense of how this surfaced in this study, here is one quote by one of the girls, a Black high school student. She said, "Leadership is about having a common vision and having the character and humility to guide, collaborate, and learn from your team, group, or org. Leadership is about knowing the members of your team well enough to encourage and challenge them to grow into leaders themselves. Leadership is caring about the people you are leading and doing what you can to support them and represent them as genuinely as you can." To me, reflecting the true power and potential of Black and Latinx girls' leadership. Next slide, please. Black and Latinx girls also scored significantly higher than white, Asian, or multi-ethnic girls on the leadership scale used in this study. They are also more likely to seek leadership opportunities and report having more leadership opportunities than girls of other ethnicities. Next slide, please. This study also made it clear that external factors like adult mentors and adult attitudes and support for girls' leadership matter. When asked how important it is for you to have leaders as your role models who are of the same race, ethnicity as you, 79% of Black girls and 64% of Latinx girls responded that it was important. Black and Latinx girls' definitions of leadership and their interest in being leaders stem from observing others in positions of leadership in their communities, schools, churches, social organizations. More when Black and Latinx girls reported that they could identify leaders of their same race or ethnicity who they admired, they scored higher on the leadership scale. The study also found that girls whose parents think of them as leaders and self-identify as leaders are more likely to score high on the leadership scale as well. Next slide, please. Linked to the study, linked to the last slide, the study also looked specifically at teachers and how they influence leadership. Black and Latinx girls are more likely to score higher on the leadership scale when they reported having more teachers of color. It is important to note that Black and Latinx girls scored higher on the leadership scale than other girls, even if they attended schools with predominantly white teachers, but they did score even higher in schools with predominantly teachers of color. On this final slide, we begin to see how teacher bias may present a barrier to girls' leadership. So although Black and Latinx girls demonstrate an interest in being leaders in their schools and communities, they reported experiencing racial and gender bias interactions with teachers and peers, as well as broader societal messages that communicate to them that they are not meant to be leaders. And you can see on this slide the disconnect between teachers' bias thinking and the leadership among Black and Latinx girls. One girl said this: the pressure of not failing weighs a lot more for Black and Latinx girls mentally and physically, because a lot of times people are not expecting that much of you, even if you have a track record of getting things done and done well. In my own experiences, I've dealt with imposter syndrome, questioning if I was fit to lead, even if I knew I was and others knew also. Over 1 in 3 Black and Latinx girls who score highly on the leadership scale have reported witnessing racial bias, with nearly 1 in 2 Black girls saying they have experienced unfair treatment because of their race from teachers and administrators. And all of these findings are why we are here today. We know there is so much work to do, and we have a group of women with their own lived experience who are going to help us understand how we create systems change through policy. With that, I'm hoping that we all have a shared understanding of the research, and if you have questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat and to continue to do so throughout the conversation, because now we are finally going to turn it to our panelists. So I want to begin by hearing each of you share your initial reactions to the report. What sticks out to you? And personally, and hopefully others are interested in this as well, I would love to hear in what ways the report compares to what you've seen and experienced in your own life or with the girls in your life personally or professionally. And I am going to pick on Stephanie, Dr. Wood-Garnett, to start, please.
Thank you so much, Patrice. The report, it's both personal and professional, as you said. Growing up early in the South in my early years, my grandmothers were very important to me. And in this report, so many of the girls talked about the importance of the mother figure in helping them develop that confidence and that leadership. My grandmothers, my mother, showed me that I could be strong, I could be a woman who could make a difference, and they encouraged me to pursue education as a route. Professionally, I have seen this through policy, the policy lens, as a place in which there's so much more that we need to do, from everything from educator preparation to in-service support of our current educators to thinking about how we use financial resources like the CARES Act or ESSER money. I think there are so many things that we could be doing, but we also have to pay attention to the context in which we live and how best to build those coalitions and those partnerships so that we can come to the table together and make the kinds of demands that I hear in the voices. So I heard pain, I heard promise, I heard potential, and I heard demands in these young girls and these high school girls talking about what they see and what they want, what they believe about themselves. And it's on us to make it happen.
Thank you. How about Mia, you jump in?
Thank you so much. I think this report, the Ready to Lead report, it could have been me in the 80s being one of those 2000 girls who got to speak to some of the issues that they've been facing in terms of how they view themselves as leaders. I loved the identification of the fact that particularly for Black and Latina girls, the areas of social justice, moral authority, and a sense and social change value was really where they led from. I think particularly for Black and Latina girls, that is the place where we start. We start with heart, have a strong sense of the legacy, and as Dr. Wood-Garnett said, kind of the context in which we live in the United States, and for us here, even in the state of California. So I think about the work that we do, Patrice, that we do at Oakland Promise, and recognize the incredible value it is to be able to kind of change that narrative, or lift up that narrative, and create spaces for particularly young women to be able to come into their own, and the power of mentors and role models in their lives to be able to do that. I think people ask a lot about what the secret sauce is of Oakland Promise, to be able to ensure that people can get put on a pathway to post-secondary opportunities, and persist through those post-secondary opportunities. And a lot of it has to do with who you're able to surround yourself with, the social networks that you're able to build, the authority with which you're able to move in the space that you're in, which can be unfamiliar either from a gender, race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status perspective. And I think it's really powerful that we know for sure, in hearing the report findings of this, that mentors are so incredibly important. So I'm glad that that's something that Oakland Promise focuses in on. And I can share that as a person who has run for elected office and has decided to make that one of the pathways of being able to express my leadership, that imposter syndrome doesn't go away. The kind of counting who you're in the room with never goes away. The need to be able to have mentors at any time in your life never goes away, and always having the opportunity to kind of have your cup filled by other women of color, and other people of color is like stays with you throughout your life. So I'm glad that we get to work on that.
And this question is for everyone, so please bring us home to Washington.
Okay. I am going to try my best to answer this question. I feel that my internet may be going in and out a little bit, so please let me know. I can always try to take my video off to better improve the connection. But thank you so much for having me with this amazing panel, and I'm going to do my best to add what I can, because clearly some very distinguished panelists. The report, I would like to say that I was surprised, but unfortunately, as an African-American woman who has pushed my way through 3 degrees and now vice president at an organization, and worked at numerous other organizations, and seen other women of color pushing their way through positions of leadership. Unfortunately, what I read was not unusual. You know, we work with young folks right now. Actually, our organization works primarily with young folks who are some of the most marginalized of young people, girls, gender expansive youth, predominantly of color. And we hear over and over and over again how they literally are almost criminalized at perhaps the youngest of ages for things that most children will be moved past and passed through in terms of school, discipline, and things of that sort. And yet the girls that we talk to and that we work with literally tell us, you know, I feel that I have been viewed and seen as unworthy and as non-deserving and as really sort of bad from the very beginning. I think that many of us really have to push our way through many of these gender and racial stereotypes, especially Black and Latinx young people. I'm very encouraged, however, that these young ladies are amazing and powerful. And even through many of the adversities that they must deal with on a daily basis, they continue to push through, they continue to be amazing leaders against all of the odds. And as you know, has already been mentioned, they really are interested in working on those issues and factors that are most often negatively impacting not only their communities and their families, but their peers as well. So, I mean, I have to admit, the youth of today, they kind of make me think to myself. I'd scratch my head and wonder what I was doing at that age, because they are really quite stellar. And it makes me feel like I was just jumping rope quite a bit. So I feel very encouraged in that respect. The teacher views, that unfortunately is not surprising as well. I think we have all dealt with our share of teachers that probably should have encouraged us, supported us, engaged us, yet chose to do something in the opposite. Unfortunately, I think many of us have had to push through many of these ideas. And I think just really the findings of the teachers' perceptions, just terms of placing the blame yet again on young people as well as their families as being the issue, when in actuality, it really is about teachers, and mentors and adults standing in front of young people and saying, no, we absolutely believe in you. We're here to support you. We're here to guide you. So it was a little discouraging to see that some of the barriers facing young people and their leadership is still coming from their teachers, just in terms of thinking that it's young people's lack of confidence or lack of support by their parents, when many parents are absolutely there for their children. So those were just some of my general impressions from reading the report. It's an excellent report, and I'm so glad to see it. It is absolutely needed, and I think I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing, all of you, and especially you, Dr. Washington. I feel like what you just shared was sobering. The collection of your stories together makes it more real. And I'm wondering then, for this next question, some of you brought up mentorship, you all brought up context being really important. And then the barrier, the very real barrier of teacher bias. Given all of that, what are the implications of the report's findings at the local, state, and the national or the federal level? What's at stake? Who needs to play a role? And perhaps we start with you, Dr. Washington.
So our organization, we primarily do advocacy at the federal level. We do some advocacy and training and technical assistance at the state level. And really what we find is that we really believe in a community participatory approach. We believe that we cannot develop policies, practices, and programs without community. And obviously, at the federal level, where women only represent 27% of those who are actually making the decisions, passing policies, developing legislation and bills and laws, when only 27% of those who are making those decisions are women, and even fewer are women of color, it really is clear that our voices are simply going to be missing. The reality is we move and we make decisions based on our experiences. And without women of color at the table, there will be many practices, many policies that simply will not address our needs. Some examples, they're a little bit old, but the Violence Against Women's Act, which was a major piece of federal legislation that addressed issues of domestic violence and sexual assault regarding women and girls. There were many policies and pieces that were amazing about this piece of legislation. It was absolutely needed. But because women of color were not a part of much of the drafting of that legislation, there were parts that actually began to negatively impact communities of color and did not address the issues in the ways that many of our communities would prefer. Now there are many organizations that are actually beginning to rethink some of those policies and practices to address, how the negative consequences of that particular policy. We can find that in really just about any policy. We understand that, especially in school situations, locally, when we're talking about school safety, we've moved towards moving school resource officers to quote unquote protect our students and our teachers. However, that's had an extremely negative impact on communities of color, with the vast majority of those who are being referred to our legal youth system being youth of color. Ideally, we would have policies that included communities of color to be in those rooms, to come up with better policies to address those particular issues. So that's just, my sense that if we're not at the table, then oftentimes what will be developed, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level, will not address our needs, our actual needs, in a way that's most appropriate. So I'll just kind of stop there.
Dr. Wood-Garnett, can you follow?
I can. So I agree with everything that Dr. Washington was describing. My organization is supporting educators. So we are supporting teachers and principals and leaders in school districts around the country, with the greatest proportion of our students in our schools being Black and Latinx. So we're about 75% nationally of our kids in the profiles that we are reading about in this report. So a couple of things that I'm concerned about in terms of who needs to be at the table and what we need to do. The first is the paucity of women in leadership roles in the education system. So if we think about the number of school districts we have across this nation, over 87% of those positions of the ultimate leadership is a male leader. And then we think about who's in the classroom. We have 75 to 80% of the people in the classroom being women. So there's this limited career path, choices or obstacles put in the way of women who are trying to become the leader for the girls that we are reading about, because they were those girls, they care about girls, they want to create a different conversation about gender equity in this country. And I think that if we're going to really have a change in schools, which is where our kids spend most of their day in school, we really need to think differently about the makeup of leadership in our school systems. And we also need to think differently about support for educators. It was really heart-wrenching to read some of the examples of the girls of the trauma they have experienced in school, either because they were personally accused or treated disparately and they could see it, or they witnessed other peers who were being treated unfairly because they are Black or Latinx. And when we have that kind of environment, it's an environment in which we don't feel safe as learners. We don't feel safe as leaders. We don't feel safe in our own communities, in the systems that have been put in front of us for access. So I think that is something I'm really interested in. Our organization is trying to do more to support women of color who do go on to those higher positions, because as we've all described, even when you make it, you're still watching your back, right? You're watching your back. You're trying to keep your cup full. You're trying to surround yourself with people who know you, care for you, and care about the issues that are important to you. So I think that as we think about the report and what we read, it's not, unfortunately, it's not new. But I think that at the moment in time we find ourselves as a country, it's a great time for us to take this information and form those coalitions and make demands, and also create support systems for those teachers and educators who actually want to do more and want to do better. So I actually see some opportunities for us now that maybe I wouldn't have seen 4 years ago. But I think with the global pandemic and everything that's going on, it is a good time to disrupt.
And I'll just share, I think what I'm hearing is when we are not there, the policies that we need and the solutions that would actually be representative of addressing the challenges that we face will not happen. From Dr. Wood-Garnett, I heard when we are not there, we won't have the ability to be able to create educational pathways and educational environments that allow us to be able to thrive and come into our own leadership. And I will add that I think that when we are not there is that we will continue to not be there. The stark reality of the report that essentially said, particularly for Black and Latinx young women, that they feel the most empowered and the most seen when they are looking at somebody or have a representative that they can lean on and know that is already there. And that being the kind of biggest indicator of whether or not they will continue to move forward, and one of the biggest indicators, whether or not they will consider to pursue a particular pathway. So I think that's where I also think that we need to focus our energy at the local, state, and federal level, is to ensure that we are creating very specific, targeted means to be able to create pathways of leadership for Black and Latinx women and women of color in particular, so that we can be there. Because we all come from a place of making sure, and I say this a lot, like when you walk through that door, the first thing that we do, by nature of who we are and where we've been, the first thing that we do as Black women, as Latina women, is put our hand back and pull someone else through that door. And we just need to make sure that we have the opportunity to do that, because then we won't be able to solve the issues that Dr. Wood-Garnett and Dr. Washington raised, which are really quite, quite necessary for us to be able to live in a different system of potential solutions for the challenges that we face as communities.
Thank you all. I have scripted questions and I'm already going off script. So because your responses are so rich. I'm going to ask two questions. It's a compound question. And I want to start with you, Mia, because something you said made me think of this. My question is, Dr. Wood-Garnett, you mentioned earlier about the importance of building coalitions and partnerships. And so related to what Mia just said, do we build coalitions and the leadership that we need among women in order to change policy, or do we create policy to ensure that leaders can be at the table, that women have a voice at the table? Is it both? In what sequence? And the question I was supposed to ask, I'm going to ask, this is the compound part, is what specific policies would you like to see? And I asked that question in conjunction with the first, because I imagine that a specific policy solution might be to ensure that women are at the table. And Mia, we'll start with you, but we can go in any order after that.
I'll be just super bold and say that one specific policy that we need is to recognize in government that community-based organizations, nonprofit sector, are really the fourth arm of the government in terms of the onus of responsibility for being able to deliver direct services, for being able to develop a kind of a research base and methodology, research base for us to be able to pull from in order to be able to shape policy, from the space of being able to create a grouping of advocates to address any kind of issue. All of that work comes from the nonprofit sector. So if I had the ability to wave a magic wand, I would make sure that that policymakers are focused specifically on lifting up and funding and creating grant programs that are ongoing and sustaining, that specifically seek to be able to ensure that nonprofits like Girls Leadership, like the nonprofits like Oakland Promise, like so many others, have the funding that they need to be able to do the work that will support the government in doing its work.
I guess I can jump in quickly. So I think for myself and my experience with the work that we have been doing is that unfortunately, oftentimes when we are talking about lifting up Black and Latinx girls, oftentimes we find that we are not only fighting those in existing leadership, but also fighting those who are trying to move into that space as well. And I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but too often we find ourselves, so we do a lot of advocacy for girls, young women, gender expansive young folks. And almost every room that we step in, no matter what the issue is that we're talking about, whether it's education, whether it's juvenile justice, whether it's around homelessness, whether it's child welfare, too often we find ourselves literally fighting for girls who are Black and Latinx for them to be seen and for them to be heard. And I'm actually a little floored and amazed that even in 2021, we often even sit in rooms where we're talking about girls specifically, hear people saying, well, what about the boys? And so one of the approaches that we have taken in our work is one, we absolutely believe in all of the work that is focused on the needs of boys, especially Black and Latinx boys. Obviously, we are in support of that. But we also came to realize that in order for us to actually to lift up the needs of what is happening with Black and Latinx girls, is we actually have to start to form our own coalitions that were specifically focused on their issues. And we had to literally push our way into rooms, push our way into coalitions that were actually formed to better our entire communities. But we had to push and force our way to lift up this voice and lift up these needs, because for whatever reason, people don't take, Black and Latinx girls seriously and the needs seriously, or we are asked to step back oftentimes and to wait because there's this assumption that things will sort of trickle down and we will be impacted as well. We find that the reality is this is not going to happen, and it has not happened. I firmly believe that we have to come together in coalition, come together as a whole, and figure out what our shared agenda is, and we have to push that forward. Or unfortunately, we may continue to find ourselves sort of coming up from the back end, trying to figure out how to get our needs met. And then, of course, at that point, I'm all for putting us in leadership positions. We have to be there, absolutely have to be there. And I, hope that, ideally it'd be great to see them both happen at once. But sometimes we may need, just that extra push of the masses behind us to get us there.
I agree with everything, and I was trying to write it down so I wouldn't lose my thoughts here. So I have 4 buckets, and the first policy that I really think we need to think differently about is both in-service and pre-service for educators. We all know, just like every parent sends their best child that they love to our schools. I don't know very many educators who enter the profession of education to harm children. And sometimes what we're seeing and what we're not seeing is a reflection of needing professional support, guidance, examples, to know how to do different things, and also to recognize when they're doing something that is harmful. I just think we should think about that. The second quick thing I wanted to say is data. We really need to have more policies that are looking at data in a different way. We should be looking at our data in our school system to see, are Black and Latinx girls participating in academic programs for excellence? Are Black and Latinx girls participating in co-curricular? Are they in the drama club? Are they in different sports teams? Because we know that if we're not seeing our girls participating in both the day and the extended day, it might be an indication of how they feel about their welcomeness in being there. The third thing I would say is our data around discipline. Dr. Washington and others have talked about this already, but I'm really concerned about the continued disparate treatment of Black girls and Latinx girls with behaviors around stupid things, dress codes, defiance, things that they should not be pushed out of a classroom for. So how are we thinking about restorative practice? And my final big push would be around, could we think differently about funding? Funding of schools is one of the biggest issues that we face in our communities. Most of the communities in which our students are attending for Black and Latinx are underfunded, under-resourced, and that leads to lesser curriculum instruction opportunities, fewer counselors, fewer programs, and that also gives these girls the message that we read, that we don't care as much about them because we're not even giving them the full scope of what others have. So I think there are so many policy improvements that we can make.
And I just like to, just absolutely snaps on that, kudos. I think, as you were speaking, I think one, support for our schools and teachers is so desperately needed. So I just wanted to, say that, repeat that again. It is so needed. And also you mentioned increasing things like restorative practices. I think that is so needed in our schools today. I think too often we really sort of look to criminalize and be punitive towards students for, behaviors that, many of my peers during my years, many years back, we engaged in, but the schools dealt with very differently. And I think that, using restorative practices is an excellent way to move forward. And so, definitely thank you for bringing that up. That's great.
Dr. Washington and Dr. Wood-Garnett, especially a follow-up question to both of you. For some of these solutions, what's the barrier here? You mentioned, is there not enough research and data providing evidence that these solutions work? Is it political will? What's getting in the way of all of the ideas that you all shared?
Political will. I think that we have the coalitions, we have the data. The similar reports come after year, decade after decade, and yet our girls are still experiencing these moments in our schools and our society that are reprehensible. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what can we do differently? And I think we have to, Mia's running, vote for Mia, right? We need to run. We need to vote. We need to attend school board meetings. We need to attend state board meetings. We need to meet with different representative groups for educators so that they can hear our voice and know that we are there wanting to support them, but also demanding that we want a different experience for the girls and the things that we are continuing to read about. So it's pushing that boulder up a hill. I do think that with coalitions, we can get this done. And I'm hopeful about that, but I think that's the issue we're facing, the domination of other genders in positions of power who may not be advocating as much for girls. We've got to advocate for ourselves and our girls.
I would second all of that and extend it to, I think the barrier is patriarchy. I think the barrier is systemic racism. I think the barrier is white supremacy. Like those are our barriers, and we are finally able to be in spaces where we can actually use those words and not fear the consequences of what it means. And I'm thankful to be in the decade and in the time that's possible. And what do we do about the fact that we can now use that language and expose that language with action? I think one of the things that we need to do, and Dr. Washington spoke to this as well, is create our own spaces and create the new spaces. We have to ensure that part of the idea of disrupting the power systems that are in play is by putting new power systems on the table and making sure that we're holding ourselves and then inserting ourselves into the structures that exist. So for me, like I think about in Oakland, like the Black Women Organized for Political Action, or Black Women's Health Project, and literally all of these groups that are coming together for the first time over in a very deliberate way, and making sure that we're centering the experience of Black and Latino women as a critical part of what we're trying to do, and then making sure that when conversations are had about resource distribution, about school policies, or about political candidates, we are positioning ourselves to be voices that absolutely need to be heard, listened to, respected, and sought.
They both me and Stephanie have, said it exactly. It's probably better than how I would have said it, right on point. The only thing that I would possibly add is also bringing in the voices of young folks and making sure that their voices are centered as well. I learned so much from listening to young people, how programs impact them, what needs to change, what's most important to them. And it really has sort of changed my personal perspective on things that need to be taken care of. So that's the only thing I would add.
Thank you all. You called out, I heard organizing, voting, running for office as a way to inspire political will and to fight patriarchy. And we know that there are caregivers and educators attending the roundtable today who care deeply about this topic, but don't work in government, don't have a background in organizing, or have never sort of been involved in deep advocacy work, perhaps may not even have the time to do that. What would you advise the communities of caregivers, educators, school leaders to do in order to take action? And how can we think about their role in activism here? I'll call on Mia because she's off mute.
I actually think about this a lot, being someone who's kind of been in the situated in the nonprofit sector for the better part of 20 some odd years. And in preparation for this, I was kind of thinking about all the different roles that we actually do play to be able to influence the systems that we think need changed. One of them is advocacy, which I think, Patrice, is the area that you're talking about. So we can be advocates, but we can also be practitioners. We can be pundits and researchers, and we can be a kind of electeds. I think, and we can be people who are building wealth and amassing that wealth to be able to deploy different aspects of influence. So I think for me, doesn't matter where you're situated, what you're passionate about, whether it's if you're a caregiver, an educator, a business person, an elected official, an advocate. At the end of the day, as long as we're oriented around the fact that wherever you're coming from, you also have a goal, not only in doing your work that you're doing, but to be able to figure out how to be able to lift up Black and Latina women, and young women in particular, then you're going to be on the right path. And that's okay. And if we get really strong at what we're doing and really, really good at it, then we'll be able to build those coalitions that link us up from the different sectors and positions in life that we come from. And when that happens, then game on, game over, we're where we need to be.
Dr. Wood-Garnett, your response to that question, especially from your seat.
From the school district seat, I love everything that was just said. I also think that learning is something we can all do in whatever time that we have, if it's a podcast, if it's reading a book, if it's getting together with a group of people to understand what's the experience of the girls in our school or in our community by using maybe some of the questions from the questions that were used in this study to hear our voices of our kids. I love that. The other thing, are there partners who can help us? So if we think about the students and how they kept talking about, the girls kept talking about mentorship. In what ways do minority serving institutions, HBCUs, other groups of women in our communities, can they be additional mentors? In our work, we talk about something called distributed counseling, because most of our schools only have like one counselor. We are saying every adult in the school can support a kid. You don't have to be a counselor. We distribute the responsibility and the care so that every student knows that there is an adult in that building who is looking out for them and supporting them. So I wonder to what extent in our schools we're able to have additional mentoring roles so that every girl knows who that advocate, that champion is for them, because the data is clear of what they need. And unfortunately, in many schools, there aren't enough Black teachers or Latina teachers to be that direct mentor. But what can we do to maybe have groups of girls working together with positive role models to meet the needs that they're describing? So those are just a few thoughts that I have.
I think if I were just to to add, and I think Mia actually already sort of touched on this, is, oftentimes leadership is not just about, being the advocate or taking a government position. Or, sometimes it's, being the person who creates the art and learns how to run an art organization, or is a musician, and, developing girls' leadership in those manners. There are a variety of different ways that we can uplift girls and have them and help them to demonstrate and support them in the demonstration of their leadership, and a whole host and variety of different activities and things that they can engage in. In fact, perhaps one of the strongest advocacy groups that I've seen is they literally advocate for young folks who are detained in the justice system, and they do it through art. Perhaps some of the most powerful work that I've ever seen, powerful and moving. So we can all be leaders in a whole host and variety of different ways. And if that's something that you're gifted at or gifted with, then you can provide that to another young person and show them how that works, then that would be fantastic. So, my thing is support the girls that are in your life and that are around you, and whatever they choose to do, and always let them know that they're loved and cared for and supported. And it's amazing how they'll shine through that. So.
I really appreciate all of your responses. One of the things that I love about what I hear you all saying is how much it connects to the study. So if we are ever tempted to question our leadership, even when we are fit to lead, we are already leading where we are. And hearing that affirmation, I think, was a perfect way to close that question. And I do want to sort of introduce us into the final question before we open it up to others in the audience for questions. If the policies you named today, the coalition building happens, game on, game over, what's your vision of classrooms and schools where the power of every girl's voice is supported and cultivated as a leader? What do you see? And this question is for everyone. And I usually start with the alphabet. Mia, you're up first, and we'll go to Dr. Wood-Garnett after that.
I think my vision would be a school that recognizes that children are coming into educational spaces with assets that should be celebrated, and schools that are built with an intention to serve the entirety of the child, the whole child mentality, I think, is something that we often lose sight of, and we know is proven that when you're addressing and taking care of social emotional wellness, when you're addressing mental health supports, when you're addressing educational opportunities, when you're focused on all of it, students are better off in a common space. I would love to have that vision include ensuring that we have more teachers and educators, administrators, and leaders of color, particularly women of color, in those positions who can be seen by our students to be the decision makers and to be the leaders of that whole system, because then we'll have more of them. And the vision of our schools also includes recognizing that we have more funding provided to students who should be invested in at a level, particularly in the state of California, that they are not. And that's a critical piece of what we need to do to ensure that we have the best possible system for students.
I'm going to put all of my eggs into a basket that I'm going to call Educator Support. And for me, that means both pre-service, those who want to be teachers, those who want to be counselors, want to be future principals. They're part of a system of higher education that is exposing them to what should be the knowledge, skills, and abilities to walk into any school in any community and feel they're efficacious, that they know what they're doing, that they can be the support and the champion that these girls are asking for. So for me, the policy has to be about, what does the Board of Regents say the educator preparation program should be teaching? To what extent does that include the issues that we talked about today, including gender, race, and all the structural barriers to our girls? The second is in service. Teachers and principals go to professional development all the time. And if you read the national studies, they say most of it's not useful, right? Oftentimes they're concerned that it's not meeting the needs that they really want to learn more about. So how do we make certain that we are honoring what they're saying and providing the kind of professional learning experiences that are better equipping them to support and accelerate and advance the girls of color, as well as any other student in their schools who are not thriving? Let's work on educator support.
I feel, again, Mia and Stephanie, my colleagues, have really named the top ones here. I think probably the biggest thing that I would like to see are classrooms that really challenge our children and have the highest of expectations. Just as a personal anecdote, I guess, I have some friends that have children who are in these rather expensive private schools, and to witness the level of education that they are afforded simply because the schools are well resourced, as has already been mentioned. The teachers are well supported. The activities are well funded. What these children experience is just over and beyond. It's exceptional. And for our communities of color, Black and Latinx, both boys and girls, I find that in many situations, and unfortunately in many cases, they are not provided that same and similar experience. So I would like to see, which really is a culmination of everything I think that has been discussed today, afforded to our communities, whether you are in a private school or in a public school. And that is what I would like to see. That's what I would like to see in terms of ideal classroom, ideal educational setting.
All right, there's the call to action. Game on, game over is the path. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to open it up to the audience for questions, and Simone is going to take over at this time.
Well, thank you all so much for this conversation. I am feeling so motivated and inspired during a month that up until now hasn't quite had that vibe, but you all really turned the beat around on this call. So thank you. The calls to action are many for all of us. So let me share some of the questions that are coming in. One of them asked for some specifics. She says, what can we do to change or break down the systemic biases and roadblocks that continue to challenge the Black and Latinx students and communities? So it's a big question. I'll read it one more time. What can we do to change or break down the systemic biases and roadblocks that continue to challenge Black and Latinx students and communities? And go to any of you that feel called to answer that.
I'll just jump in quickly. I think our process, even with reports like this, our ability to identify them clearly, and as Mia mentioned, as well as Stephanie, really calling out what we see clearly and very specifically without being apologetic, I think is first and foremost. If we're unable to identify what the issues are, then we lose that opportunity to even to begin thinking about changing them. And then, so I think that's one of the first steps. And then I kind of lost my train of thought. So that's where I am right now. And then I'll jump back in later when retract myself.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Washington. Anyone else want to add to that one?
I would just say more opportunities in our communities. I know that the pandemic has definitely impacted economic viability in many of the communities that serve large numbers of Black and Latina students. I just feel like the promise of opportunity and being able to live in that community for a long time and to be able to be a leader in that community. I'd love to see a revitalization of our communities and how we're going to do that as we continue to struggle through the pandemic. And then the last is the conversation we had earlier about policing and about positions of authority and their interactions with communities that are Black and Latino. I think we need to continue to strive to reimagine and rethink some of the systems that are in place, because it impacts how our students feel about how we perceive them and how we treat them and what opportunities they have.
Thank you for those two, Dr. Wood-Garnett. Mia, did you want to leave it there? Okay. This next question comes from a participant who says, this is amazing. Thank you. As an educator, what advice do you have for students who want to get involved in creating or advocating for policies such as the ones you mentioned today?
I will take that question as a current sitting school board member and just offer. I have seen all of the political action that I've been involved in over the course of this last 24 months to be able to encourage the Black Lives Matter movement, to be able to really put forth good decisions or things that we should be thinking about related to the pandemic and school safety and student learning have been driven by students. And so I think one thing is that students need to recognize when they come together, when they use their voice and when they come together and they spend the time to be able to put out policy positions, put out demands, requests, whatever it is, in front of adults, it's the most powerful thing that can happen. So many times this school year on the school board where we, and in years prior, where we've changed direction because we had groups of students coming before us and saying, this is what we want and this is what we need. And I think just, take the time to sit with, 2 or 3 of your friends, find out if those 2 or 3 friends can find 2 or 3 other friends. The group doesn't need to be big. Identify an adult ally that is in the system that you're trying to change. If it's schools there, if it's an organization, even if it's your church, whatever it is, identify an adult ally, and then figure out where the place of presentation would be to be able to say, this is what we want, and be really clear about what you want, what the expectations are, and what you hope the response will be, and put a timeline on it. And works every single time. It works.
I would just add, build that into the curriculum. So for our educators who were, participating today, there are so many ways we could take what Mia just described and connect it to social studies, connect it to the curriculum, allow the students to identify a problem in the community and a solution, and give them a forum to share what they're learning. Because as you said, it is amazing. And their solutions sometimes are things we didn't think about. And they identify things that we don't see there in front of us. So I love that idea.
Thank you. Dr. Washington, did you want to add to that? You good? Okay, great. Thank you. We'll definitely take that note at Girls Leadership with our curriculum. So thank you for that feedback. We have time for one last question, which is, given the presence of pushback, how do you deal or respond to those who question critical race theory or the whole premise for this work? how do you keep them from getting the attention and energy in the room? Any advice on that pushback wave?
I don't know if I have
Well,
advice. Is there advice? You go first. You're up.
To be honest, the only advice that I have is you just have to keep pushing. You absolutely have to keep pushing. And in those moments where people ask you to sit down and not be your assertive female, woman, girl of color self, you just continue being that and doing that. Like I had mentioned, it is, my entire career working with girls has been about nothing but pushback in every setting, under every issue, without fail, there's always pushback. Again, part of the key is you find those who are your allies, those who are in the work with you, who understand the work, who understand your position, the issues that you're going to be facing. You come into the room together. You build your allyship from there. And that was one of the reasons why I mentioned just sort of like, build those coalitions. The more people who are behind you, the more people will hopefully pay attention. But I think the saying is the arc is slow and bending. And so it takes a while. You also have to just move with some patience, but assertiveness.
So I'm from the other coast on this side here. So I'm going to give a different response. I agree with what you said. I said, no, I would say know your context. So if you're in the Midwest, you're in a red state, a purple state, how can you have those conversations in a way to get people to the table so that we can identify which students in our communities are not thriving? I'd rather fight over that sometimes in those communities than fight over what we call it. Because if we look at the data is going to show us what is happening to students in our communities. And I'm looking for another way to get to the table in places that hear critical race theory and they just shut down. So I'm trying to figure that out, but definitely push in your context, and then push louder.
Thank you. Mia, did you want to add to that one?
No, but I did. Briseida Mendoza had a question in the chat. I'm hoping we can just sneak in.
Go for it.
It was, what advice would you give in regards to imposter syndrome and working in the spaces you have, advocating for leadership for women and girls of color? I will just say, Briseida, and I'll use it as my closing thoughts. As I shared before, I'm still experiencing imposter syndrome, and I am, I've been in this work a long time and have been somebody in leadership positions for the better part of my career. And what I find the best defense to having that feeling is to be vulnerable about the fact that I am having that feeling with people who I know have the ability to support me in leading through that moment. So find, I call it my kitchen cabinet, people who are going to love up on me, be able to talk to me, talk me straight, people who will know me and who will know my context, and keep them close to you. And when you're in those moments and having those feelings, just reach for that group and get through the day, get through the week, get through the month, and it'll be better.
I heard healing in that response. So I agree with everything you said. It's every day that I'm questioning, I'm wondering, I'm feeling. I surround myself, I try to fill the cup, but these leadership roles are difficult. And I think sometimes as women of color, we give. And then we realize that our health starts to be impacted, our wellness, our mental health. Take care of yourself or you can't lead.
I can't think of better words to end on for all our girls, for the 25 million girls across the US than those ones. So I hate to close this conversation because I am learning so much, and we are all so lucky to be soaking up all this wisdom. But but I'm afraid we need to bring this conversation to a close. So thank you for closing on wellness and healing for all of us as leaders. We're going to hold on to that. And by us taking that in, we will have it to give to our girls. I want to thank everyone who joined the conversation today from across the country. Thank you for being part of this movement for these girls. We are counting on the leadership of every single one of you. So thank you for being part of this. Patrice, watching your facilitation, it's always, every time I work with you, it's a lesson, and today was another lesson. So thank you for showing us how it's done. Dr. Washington, Dr. Wood-Garnett, and Mia Bonta, thank you so much for your insights, your expertise, and your wisdom. It is truly an honor to learn from each of you. So thank you. I hope you'll be part of the kitchen cabinet for girls leadership. So don't be surprised when the phone rings. We also want to again thank Vodafone America's Foundation for making this conversation possible today. And while today's conversation is on one hand, the closure of a year of conversations around this report, we all know that we have a long way to go to support the leadership of Black and Latinx girls in the United States. And I am feeling inspired that this is the beginning and we have this data, and I feel called to action. And I hope if you are participating that you'll put in the chat, what's the action that you're going to take? What's the thing that you're going to do for the girls, for your imposter syndrome, for any action that you want to take? I hope you'll put this in the chat, and together we will create systems and schools worthy of our girls. So thank you all for this dialogue. So grateful. Thank you.